And welcome back. It's time for Opinion Court. You can get in touch with us on 22422. That's our SMS line. At Citizen TV Kenya. That's our Twitter handle. On Facebook, we go by that name as well. Please use the hashtag Opinion Court so we can track your conversation. We are discussing the Jubilee government at half term. And of course, you've seen the politicking around 2017 intensifying. My guest this evening, Sakaja Johnson, is the national chair of the National Alliance, of course, which is a constituent party of the ruling Jubilee coalition. And Edward Kisengani, he's our resident political panelist. I must say that we did make our best attempt to get a member of the opposition on the show, but none were available. Nonetheless, the show goes on. Prof, I will start with you this time round. What is your assessment of Jubilee's leadership so far?
I think there are areas that have done very well. So unless we go by specific areas, we probably could be fair or unfair. But in general, average. Average? Yes, they have been average because there's still a lot of areas to be fixed. I think they're doing very well in the power sector. Including yesterday announcement by the president. I think if you walk around the country, you could see genuine commitment by the government to give people power, connect them to the national grid. I think there is genuine concern, especially, and I'm saying especially with the president, to fight corruption. I think he's frustrated by a lot of forces, both within his own coalition and outside. But as a person, I think he seems to be giving the correct message that we cannot continue, leading this country under the monster of corruption. So on that, he's doing very well. But there are other areas that probably he hasn't done well. The government hasn't done well. I think the laptop project will haunt Jubilee up to 2017. There's a lot of confusing signals about it, and the little kids are still waiting for those laptops. The explanation is not coming through very well. The question of insecurity, Anne, I think although we all need to make a contribution to that, because the government of the day must provide security, I think people are still genuinely concerned that security is not very well. And then the confusion in the education sector hasn't also sat down well with the public. We need to undertake drastic measures about that. The economy, that is one of the areas that is really worrying. The shilling is exchanging at 98 shillings per dollar. That means that now it's going to be very expensive to import certain things from other countries. So it means that a weak shilling also is not a good signal for our economy. It means that we have a lot of money in circulation chasing very few goods, and that raises inflation. So in general, I think at halftime, you can say, because we are almost halftime going towards 2017, the government has tried in some areas. In some areas, it still needs to do more.
Sakaja, your own view in terms of your coalition's performance?
First of all, thank you for the invite. I think to give an objective view, there are many areas that we had targeted to address within our manifesto. And if you keep the politics aside, we're actually on track on a lot of them. And I will list a few. If you look at health, for example, we started the free maternity program, which many have criticized. But as of now, maternal mortality, the women losing their lives during childbirth, as well as children, has gone down by 26%. If you look at electricity, the cost of electricity has gone down by 25% so far. That is something. And something remarkable is that between 1919 and 2012, only 1 million Kenyans were connected to the grid. Between 2012 and, or rather 2013 and today, another new 3 million have been connected. And between 2015 and 2017, we intend to connect another 2.5 million. That is amazing and it's outstanding. If you look at infrastructure, the government is doing well now with the annuity program. A lot of the roads that are now being done, our target is 10,000 kilometers. I think we've already hit around 2,500. And if you look at the SGR, some people said it will never happen. half of the 609 kilometers has already been excavated, and the sleepers are being put in for the truck, which is indeed, quite an achievement. When you go to the land sector is an area where many Kenyans have never had the right to own their titles. Within the last 2 years, we've been able to do more than 643,000 new titles for land that had not been previously adjudicated, and that's part of the performance that we can credit to Charity Ngilu. Devolution is something else. If you look at the politics, people say we're fighting devolution, others say we're not giving enough money, but we've moved from 190 billion in 2013, and this year we want to give 258 billion, and there is some progress, in as much as many Kenyans are not happy. Look at service delivery to the people. There are now Huduma centers in, I think, around 26 counties, and we've just given more money for all the other counties to have Huduma centers, so people don't have to come to Nairobi to get basic services. The economy is an issue that also takes time. Yes, the shilling is not doing well, and we're glad that the committee within Central Bank is sitting tomorrow to deal with that in terms of the
monetary policy committee.
But look, we're growing at 6% now. That is higher than what has been before.
Let me take you back to some of the things that you have highlighted as gains. You talk about lands and giving titles. Yet still in the same sector, a lot of corruption exists. Yes. A lot of rot. Charity Ngilu, you've credited for some things, but the DPP has told us while he's not prosecuting her, there are still other files that are being investigated. You've talked about the economy. I know there are astounding figures like FDI investment, foreign direct investment, of doubling to the country. But at the same time, like Prof said, there's a question with the shilling. Yes, we're a middle-income economy, but at the same time, inflation remains pretty high. The cost of basic commodities remains really high. And so even in areas where there seems to be some good performance, it's equally tapered with some really worrying trends. How do you reconcile these two?
Let me start with the economy, then go down to the issue on land and a lot of the general challenges in a lot of these areas. You see, if you were to grow taller by 6%, you'd not feel it. You'd see the side effects of it. You'll see your trousers getting shorter and whatnot. And
but you wouldn't feel taller.
You would not feel taller. Right. The whole world has recognized it. Bloomberg said out of the lucky 7 countries in the whole world, Kenya is there. Right now, economy is growing, is the 3rd highest in terms of the rate of growth in the world after China and the Philippines. In the same way, when you plant a seed, after 1 month, people will not see the maize growing. But after time, and the effects will come. We're not big on just numbers. What we want to make sure is that Kenyans actually feel a change at the very basic household level, and that is what we're working at. We're trying to subsidize the production side. Many people would have wanted us, and I think that's the economic philosophy of court, to subsidize at the till, and say let maize be 20 shillings. But we're considering also that there's a farmer, and that farmer must also get value for his goods. Why don't we reduce the factors, the cost of the factors of that production? And if you look at the subsidies in terms of fertilizer and other inputs to agriculture, the government actually is trying. The next phase, because this is exactly 2 years and I think 72 days from when Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in, His Excellency. The next phase for us is really translation of a lot of these things to what Kenyans can actually see and feel. Another hindrance, of course, is corruption. And I think we have seen the president himself leading the fight against corruption. There are other institutions which have to play their role, and the independent institutions. The president actually went out of his way to an independent institution like the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The law actually allows any, for example, Parliament or the judiciary or the executive to ask for certain reports, and he asked them, give me this list, and he tabled the list in Parliament, and it's going on. So if the pace is slow, there's another independent office called the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. There's only so much the president can do. But what there is in terms of the fight against corruption is public goodwill. Never before in the history of this country have we seen a president who is willing to put his ministers on the line, to put public officials on the line in his government to root out corruption.
I think the bottom line is, I agree with you, Honorable Sakaja, on the point that the president has shown, and that is how I started, that the president has done very well. And maybe when we come to discuss the rating, I'll say a few other things, but there's a very big team behind the president. We need some explanation. For example, we floated the Euro bond a few months ago, probably almost a year ago. That Euro bond was supposed to give us easier credit, cheaper money to do infrastructure and other things, and cushion us against competing as citizens against the government when we go to borrow money from banks. I mean, again, the government went ahead and then set the KBRR. You remember the basic lending rate from central bank, which will be used as a basis for other banks to give credit. And not much has taken place. The public has not felt the impact of the Eurobond. Again, credit, if you saw the information that we filtered in yesterday in the media, I think banks are still overcharging the public. And I asked one person on the corridors of the economic sector why this is happening. He told me that the reason why this is happening is the government is borrowing from the domestic market so much. That means that when you go to look for credit, you also meet there the Minister for Finance also asking for money. And when he asks for money, Kisiangani will not get money. So these are questions that regarding the economy that we would like some explanation.
But Sakaja did say that, you know, it will take about, you're hoping in this second phase, this last phase, that she'll be able to translate it, you know, to perhaps the base level of the economy for the Mwananchi.
To the base level.
Is there enough time for that? Prof, do you expect that in the before we get to 2017, we should be seeing dramatically different prices of commodities and really feeling the impact of this middle income economy in our home economies?
I don't see that. What are the indicators? Because, you know, it's not just about talking about rumors. We need some indicators to show that something can happen. For example, when banks take this 1 year not to do anything about the interest rates, and the government's policy is that we want a lot of people to access credit. Is there a mechanism where government can send the correct signal that, look, if you don't do it, you are not with us? We haven't seen these signals. The argument is that it's a free market so you don't threaten them. But somehow a way must be worked out where they also become part of the economic growth that the president is talking about, the government is talking about. These signals are not coming through.
So there are soft and tough measures that actually government must take and can take. The policy has been to ease off the domestic market as much as possible, and the effects of that Eurobond are actually being felt because the disbursements are not, it's not that you borrow and all the money comes immediately. Government is borrowing less and less. If you look at, and I don't want to preempt what is going to come to Parliament, but I'm privy to certain information. When the finance bill comes, you will see actually less borrowing from the domestic market, so that the rates can go down. But even when that is done, the legislative framework currently is not strong enough for government to regulate the rates that banks are charging. And as you're saying, there must also be team players. And those are motion that was brought. And you
have the largest number of members in Parliament, so you would be in a position to do something.
Actually, it's something that we're looking at. I sit in the Finance Committee as well. It's something that we're looking at. We're trying to look at best practice around the world. And we should soon be introducing a bill. Those are motions that have been brought and it passed in, about regulation of these rates. I think it was by Honorable Shakil Shabir or someone, I can't remember. And we passed it because we agree that must be done. But I think certain amendments to the Banking Act and the Central Bank Act would give us a more predictable, economic atmosphere when it comes to dealing with those rates. And that's something very important.
All right, I want to move to the Ipsos poll. Yesterday, it showed that the president's ratings have declined owing to terrorism specifically. That drop was from 67%, I think, in November, if I am right, to 48% now. Sakaja, you've previously been on this show. In fact, the last time that I hosted you, it happened to be on the occasion of another terror attack. And you were very critical of the very government that you are part of in terms of how they've approached security. Where is the failure? Where is the growth? Because we've heard government saying, we've put in these laws, new security laws, etc. We're trying to modernize the police force. But all these things, even just in the past 2 weeks, we keep reporting about incursions over our borders and more attacks. How do you, again, reconcile these two very opposite things?
You see, I was not critical of the government. I was critical of the approach being used at that point. And within Jubilee, we have the democratic space to actually discuss these things. And it was taken positively. Some of the things that we must all realize, and I kept saying it, is that the insecurity we have right now is a product of severe underinvestment over many years. And the effects of what are being felt because we're actually in a state of war. And what we've been saying is that the forces must reorient their thinking and their approach to understand we're dealing in a state of war. And so should we all as Kenyans. The challenge has been politicizing security. this is one time when all Kenyans must rally behind their commander-in-chief, because we are all under threat. When Al-Shabaab come, they don't ask you if you're ODM or Jubilee or TNA. Actually, many of them have been asking about your religion. So some of the things that needed to be done, and I was very vocal about it, was that one, the leaders from those areas must have become, you know, we were asking for them to be more vocal and to show us what they're doing about it, because those communities are very close-knit. People know each other. You know, if someone's son disappears for 1 year, you will know that he's not there and he has gone to Al-Shabaab. And fortunately, and I must commend them that since I raised that issue, and since we raised it, and they had already started that initiative, we have seen a lot of people coming out from those areas. These leaders could not even mention the word Al-Shabaab in the areas for a long time because of the cultural issues. It was almost like a four-letter word to talk about Al-Shabaab, and now they're talking about it. They're cooperating better with government. We need that. So it's a lot of concerted effort. A lot of these attacks, unfortunately, might continue happening because we're under. It's a global issue. Only recently we saw attacks in Europe. We've seen attacks in the most advanced countries, because that is the agenda.
But if you were to leave terror aside and talk about our own internal conflicts, and we've reported on this recently, you know, with cattle rustling, etc., the response time has been dismal. And Prof, my question to you is given that huge decline to 48% from 67, just over those few months, and it being credited to insecurity, is that a big enough issue that could cost this government the next election? I think
the question you're asking, Anne, one, you know,
yeah, please don't change my question.
Yes.
Just answer.
I'm just saying that this question I have for once responded to it in one of the shows on this program. That I gave an example for Nigeria. The reason why Goodluck Johnson lost, Jonathan lost the election to Buhari, who's a former dictator. One of the issues was security. And I observed on this show that unless the Jubilee administration works hard round the clock to check the state of insecurity, it can cost them an election. So this is not a joke. It can cost them an election. But when you look at the drop in the numbers in terms of popularity of the president, I would ask him not to worry. He doesn't have to worry. There is a cushion. Two things. I think that drop alone shows the concern of the people, but it has no reflection on his popularity. Because if people didn't like him, probably it would come down to zero.
You think he's still a likable politician?
The reason why I'm saying that is this. He is still in charge, but you can see the performance of his cabinet. So people are able to differentiate between Uhuru Kenyatta and the people who work with him. Secondly, if you look at the Ipsos Synovate rating, you look at the First Lady's rating, it is 55%. The president is very lucky to have that kind of thing, because that already is a huge support for him. People will have to look at the face of Margaret and then say, the First Lady, and then say, we have to vote in Uhuru. We have to vote in.
People go to the polls.
They do that.
Let's skip this.
No, I'm telling you that because if he was a bad president, that is all they would ask. You saw what happened between Michelle and Obama. At one time, Obama was not doing very well, and his rating was very low. But the rating of Michelle was very high, and she went out to campaign for the president, and even argued that if he was a bad person, then my programs would not work. So the president, it is too early for the president.
She has political clout.
Yes,
that you can still capitalize.
Yes.
Let me say this. Even just picking up from what I was saying before, which I was not able to complete. Security is a big issue. We're putting in more money. In fact, if you look at this year's budget, the investment and the amount of money we're putting in to deal with these challenges is big. We need more, more forces. We need better equipment, 21st century kind of equipment to deal with our borders, etc. And I'm still not for that, all being done there. But
has it started?
On the issue, I'm not sure about that. On the issue of approval ratings, first of all, what was the question that was asked? Were people asked, would you vote for so-and-so as president? Or was it just a measure of sentiment at a very emotional time? We lost 148 children in Garissa. It was very emotional. And after that, we've had issues in Baragoi and in Adome. I went to Baragoi and Maralal just to speak to the people, and you can feel there's actual heart and pain within the Kenyans. So I understand, yes, security is a big issue. I can assure you the president and the government is doing as much as it can. And you heard when the Secretary of State of the US came, John Kerry said actually security and terrorism especially is a global challenge, and they're willing to partner with us. And I will see, and I'm sure we will see success in that. But I would just like to urge our opponents not to start celebrating, because we have seen them even in the past. They rely on opinion polls and they fail at the ballot. We are not falling for that trap of just relying on those polls. It might indicate the concerns that people have, but there's no direct correlation with the voting preferences that Kenyans will have.
Gentlemen, I'm completely out of time, but I must ask very quickly 2 questions. The first, you've talked about your opponents, and let's talk about Raila Odinga's ratings, which are up to 29%, the former Prime Minister and leader of the Court Coalition. That's from 24%. It's a marginal growth, but one nonetheless. Prof, do you owe that specifically to just the fact that there's discontent within government? In fact, government institutions, all of them faring at no higher than 25% in terms of approval. Is it purely because one is declining so that, obviously the other would increase? Or do you think initiatives such as Okoa Kenya show that the Court Coalition is seriously thinking about viable alternatives for the Kenyan people?
I think it also goes to what Honorable Sakaja is saying. I don't know which question was asked. If the question was asked that, you see, would you vote for Uhuru rather than Raila, or Raila rather than Uhuru, then we would understand the things they are considering. But I would also say that, because this is a field that I work in very, very much, I would just say that also for CORD, as they go towards the 2017 elections, they are saying they cannot divide. They will also have some crises which are coming, including a division. They should not pretend that they could easily split into 3 parts. And at that time, we shall now look at the rating of Raila Odinga against some of his principles. If they walk away from him, then we might determine whether he's popular that way or not.
In the same way we would figure for Isaac Ruto, should he walk away in the split?
Yes. So it's too early to tell that number means nothing. For me, it is insignificant.
All right.
See,
finally, Sakaja.
They should be very worried that they're just marginally increasing the approval, despite the fact that for the last 2 years they've been politicking and campaigning while we've been working. So if it was a race, they've been running, they're still running, they're on a head start. We are working, implementing manifesto, they're politicking. I don't think Okoa Kenya has resonated with Kenyans. They're still struggling to get those signatures. They launched it, but they've not even handed them over to the IEBC. And the more they keep skirting in the dark, the bigger the challenge they'll have. And recently you heard the president telling them, just start preparing for the next election.
All right, Prof, your final view.
Yes.
Your final
and
Anne,
yes. The problem I have with the Sinovet thing is this. They talk about Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the president of the Republic, against Raila Odinga, as if it's already a given thing that Raila Odinga is going to be the presidential candidate.
To be fair, the poll actually included Moses Wetangula, Kalonzo Musyoka, but for the purposes of our discussion, we took the 2 leaders of the major coalitions. Gentlemen, that is all the time we have. On a video call, can you believe it? I thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
We're taking a short break and we're back with more after this.